All right, good morning. Let's get started. My name is Scott Emerson. I'm with the Retail Coach, and we want to welcome you to today's webinar, a presentation on how to get the most out of your marketing and recruitment efforts. We have it today presenting with us our partnership with Marketing Alliance, and we just want to kind of cover a couple logistics first before we get started. Today's webinar will be recorded and emailed to all of the participants that I've registered. This is a redo of a webinar that we tried to present 2 weeks ago and had some technical difficulties through GoToWebinar. And so we will make sure that the recording makes it to both that list and today's list. So again, we want to thank you for participating today. And one more thing that we need to cover is that any questions that you might have, please use the questions dialog box through GoToWebinar. And if you'll submit those, you can certainly, we'll try to answer as many of those when we get to the bottom of our webinar presentation today. But also, I'll share with you my email address at the end of this presentation. And, we would welcome any questions that you might have or something that we could discuss directly with you after this presentation that we could even get in front of Mark and Lee, and I'm sure they'd be glad as well to help out. So with that, we'll get started. What we think we have today is about a 45 or 50-minute presentation, and then we'll take maybe 10 or 12 minutes at the end for question and answer. So again, my name is Scott Emerson. I'm Vice President of Operations for the Retail Coach. My background is in architecture, and I've worked in the retail architecture world for about the last 10 or 11 years, and then been working with the Retail Coach for about a little bit over 2 years now in sort of a business development, retail project manager role, and now in the Vice President of Operations role. I work directly with our sites analysis team, doing sites inventory, conceptual site planning, and basically marketing for our clients to retail site selectors on a daily basis. Austin Farmer is our Director of Marketing and unfortunately is not able to join us today, but he's had a hand in helping present this webinar today and brings a lot of experience in marketing for economic development agencies. From Marketing Alliance today, we have Lee Campbell, who's an account executive with Marketing Alliance, and Mark has about a little bit over 20 years of marketing experience and working directly with advertising and commercial printing and freelance graphic design, but also working directly with economic developers and communities across the country. Lee is a speaker, and I've heard him on multiple occasions speaking on the topics, and I know what he's got prepared for us today will be good for us. Mark Williman is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Marketing Alliance, and Mark comes from a background of being a military veteran, but also working as the marketing director for Mississippi National Guard. And Mark's been in the private sector now for a little bit over 10 years, but working directly with Marketing Alliance brings a lot of experience from understanding how to market your community or your agency to the world. So we are pleased to have Marketing Alliance with us today and are looking forward to the material that they have. So our agenda today is going to cover how to get the most out of your marketing and recruitment efforts. Our agenda today will cover an outlook and trends in economic development marketing. We think it's important to understand the basics of who we market to, why we market to it, and then kind of take a look at the past as to what trends have brought us to where we are today, but also, who is our audience? Second, we want to cover presenting the right data, because we feel that you need to have the right market-driven, fact-based data out there, and we want to cover those means of obtaining that data and what you would present. And then lastly, we would like for Marketing Alliance to help us cover the topic of utilizing the right channels of marketing, because more so today than any other, we know that it's a multi-channel approach, and that you need to be utilizing those right channels of marketing to be able to reach your audience. I show this slide because I think it's important. For most communities, Main Street isn't the central hub of activity that it once was. You can think back to 1940, 1950, where Main Street was where everybody came to one central location for their retail goods and services. Marketing was a little bit different back in the day, and because all of the foot traffic came to one location, and because we didn't have things like suburban sprawl and urban sprawl and all these things going on in the retail world, it was a little bit different. Today's marketing campaign has to adapt to that and understand that technology and transportation has drastically changed the platforms in which we reach our audience and the ways that you need to go about that. Through the Retail Coach, we've obviously done a lot of look into the trends and how online shopping is affecting the retail world and the bricks and mortar world that we know it. Obviously, the recession of 2007, 8, and 9 sort of drastically changed the retail platform and how site selectors currently look at communities and what data they're pulling. But it's certainly different than it was back in 1940, 1950, 1960. We also know that today's market is completely different in the way that that people move to a community or the ways that people interact within their own community. So community development must be a focus. We preach day in and day out that economic developers, cities and communities, and everybody that's associated with this need to see retail as an economic development tool. 40 years ago, 30 years ago, probably even 20 years ago, it was very typical to see someone getting out of college and moving to a particular community for an industry. So my job led where we live, and now because the job got me here, I'm going to decide where we live, how we eat, how we shop, where we do all those things. Today's modern day economic development is directly impacted by a quality of life factor. So millennials that are getting out of college these days, that generation X, Y, and Z is certainly looking at your community in a different aspect. And retail site selectors are adapting to this. They're looking at where they want to live, dine, eat, play, and shop first, and then trying to go out and find their jobs. We have a resource, somebody that we rely on heavily around here. Her name is Melissa Housel with Tennessee Valley Authority. Melissa has years and years of experience in retail recruiting and helping communities go out and recruit retail and what aspects of your community you need to be looking at, what initiatives you can go after. But Melissa has a recent effort of looking at the millennial focus. So how does a community adapt and address these issues of attracting millennials in the younger crowd? Because we're seeing it on the front of urban revitalization, and those cores of downtown all across the country are becoming more important again. So certainly in the retail world, your ability to attract and entertain and provide that sense of well-being or that quality of life factor is so important today. It's important to understand that community development precedes economic development. So every good marketing and recruitment campaign is aimed at controlling first impressions. And a lot of what we're talking to you about today is you taking a proactive stance at controlling that first impression. So whether that's a site selector in his home office 10 states away who's just doing web research on your community, or whether that's somebody showing up on your front doorstep telling us that they want to ride around town and see what the residential population looks like, what's the healthcare situation here, to what are the sites that you would have us go on. And all of those things involve from community appearance and urban vitality to what is your pride of ownership. Is your infrastructure 50, 60 years old? Can you even get water and sewer to the location that you're asking me to look at? To the evidence of crime. If you've got a lot of graffiti across town or bars on the windows, that's one issue of community development that we feel like you need to take a hold on first before you start putting all your dollars into some sort of marketing campaign. Zoning codes and code enforcement. Site selectors want to know that you're going to be easy to deal with, but also that you've got standards and regulations that are going to protect their investment. Developers want to know that as well. What does it look like when I go and just Google search your community or your economic development agency or other industries that are already there? What's the web presence that you have? What's your rate of business or industry retention? Do you have a proactive leadership that shares the same vision as what you're telling me you have? What's their accessibility to the folks that are going to be making key decisions on my project and what's coming to town? And then Do you have readily available dynamic information that is available to me? Sometimes it's as easy as just, one of the first steps might be performing a SWOT analysis, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are. And if nothing else, just having a game plan for how you're going to address those weaknesses. A lot of what we're going to talk to you about today is controlling the positive message, highlighting what is the best things about your community, and not necessarily hiding all those negative issues, but at the very minimum, having a game plan and a strategy for those. Retailers and developers and investors are looking for a stable or an improving community. They want to know that their risk is going to be verified and justified if they're going to come there. So that's why they're using so many more levels of data, so many more levels of channels of obtaining that data and looking at your community from different perspectives. It's not that you'll hear me say this more than once today. It's no longer you can hand over a 25-page set of demographics and hope that based on the fact that you have positive growth trends that they're going to locate there. You need to determine your audience. So obviously on the industrial side or job creation side, you're looking at that global market versus a regional market. So if you're looking at, determine who you're marketing to. If you're trying to land a national or an international company to try to come and locate an industry there, certainly you're looking at a global market and those communities across the country that you might be competing with. But if it's in the retail world, a lot of times what we see is that retailers will identify their growth plan or a territory that they want to grow in, and you're actually competing with either the city next door or maybe a competing city that's on the other side of the MSA from you that has similar demographics to you. And so, what we tell our clients a lot of times is that you need to understand who your competitors are. You need to be able to play offense on this side so that if we find out that there's a retailer or an industry looking in your region for a particular location, that your resume floats to the top of the stack and that you've got all the means and the methods and the data out there, or a proactive team that is going after this for you so that your resume stands out above the rest. You also need to identify the correct channels of marketing. So I'm sitting here leading a webinar right now, and I look around me and I've got an iPad, I have a laptop in front of me, we have a mini Mac on the wall, we have cameras in the room, as well as my iPhone sitting next to me. Most folks that are in the business world or the site selection world today certainly utilize multiple means of technology to obtain the data that they're looking for. And there's been a shift in millennial and again, that Generation X, Y, Z marketing trends that you need to be able to identify and put the information out there across different channels or different platforms. At the end of the day, you certainly need to make sure that your marketing campaign is adaptive, creative, consistent, and being proactive. I can't say that more precisely than that those things make sure that you stand out above the rest. And if we look back across the trends of where we were, and again, I just talked about it, do you remember where we were 10 years ago? So 10 years ago, let's say pre-recession, 2005, 2006, what did your marketing campaign look like then? And I would love for Lee and Mark to share something about this.
Mark, do you remember 10 years ago?
I definitely remember 10 years ago. 10 years ago is when I actually came to work at Marketing Alliance. And we were doing a lot of the same things that we are doing today. Still print, there's still direct mail and email campaigns and websites. But we have the ability now to be much more targeted, much more focused on who the prospect is, to drive specific information to them. So all the tools or a lot of the tools we were using 10 years ago, we're still using. But one example, when I first got to Marketing Alliance, we were really experts in Flash technology. We had a fantastic team. We were using Flash for lots of projects. And literally, practically overnight, in just a couple of months, Flash programming, Flash technology all but disappeared with the introduction of the iPhones and iPads. And so that's just one example of how quickly technology can change, and it has just in the time I've been here.
Well, and I can look at our own marketing strategy here for the retail coach. I mean, certainly we were reaching folks by direct mail campaigns and print form. We would show up at ICSC trade shows with, 4, 5, 6 suitcases of printed material. To hear Kelly, our CEO, talks about it from, he was a national site selector turned retail consultant. So he was on one side of the table receiving all of that information at one point, and then flipped. He was the guy that was providing that data for communities. It's certainly changed. Those guys at ICSC are not looking for, a 20, 30, 40 page PDF or a folder that you bring to play. They want a link to your website or a business card or a quick one-page flyer. And then when they go to those locations, they want to make sure that, you've got all the dynamic tools and the multi-channel resources that they're looking for. So let's transition into talking about presenting the right data. So more important than anything that we're talking about, if you don't have the right data, if you are not out there representing your community based on fact-based, market-driven data, then really there's no verification of what your market really is. The site selector is going to be left up to his own interpretation of that. And so we as the retail coach, and I know the Marketing Alliance team works at this as well, is out there to tell the story. A lot of times if all I can get on your community is census data, or you've linked me to an Esri profile or something on your website, I don't get the rest of the story. So if you've had major industry, or let's say you are a community that's showing high residential growth trends, and you've had, a 200% increase in residential permits issued over the last 24 months, that's important, critical information that somehow needs to get in the hands of somebody. And you want to make sure you've got that information out front and present it in a dynamic mode. So presenting the data is probably one of the most important things that we do. You need to understand your competition. Again, I'll talk about, making sure you're on the offensive side, but if there's a community right next door to you that has seen significant growth over the last 24 months, and you're trying to figure out yourself what's going on with their incentive package, or what other retailers do they have, or what developers do they have in town working. You need to understand who your competition is. And if let's say you're an economic developer looking for, to land a global industry giant that's out there, you need to know who those communities are that you identify yourself with, or that you might have similarities to, that become your competition across the nation. But more importantly, if you're on the retail side, knowing what retail is next door to you, what pros and cons that community has over yours, what their demographics and their psychographics say about their particular community that might be leveraged over your community. And then, like I said, taking all that information and applying that so that you know what to highlight about your community that makes you stand out. You need to understand who your retail trade area is. This is a map of Oakland Park, Florida, right on the beach access just north of Fort Lauderdale. But the green area represents Oakland Park's city limits. And even though they're a pretty good sized town, square miles, their trade area extends a lot further than that. So understanding exactly where your consumers come from. If you have a major retailer in your trade area or in your city limits, you need to know where those customers are coming from. And for us, we basically try to identify a unique boundary that identifies that. Certainly, you can go about this by just pulling radial reports or drive time reports that would show where those customers are coming in from. But that trade area becomes so much more important, because that's a true identification of where those consumers are willing to come in and shop from. But it also gives you an idea of where that boundary line is as to when they go maybe down to Fort Lauderdale or to the next community over to shop for those same goods and services. One method we use to go after this data, and this is readily available material, is what we call a cell phone density analysis. And this again is Oakland Park, Florida. But what we did here was we used one of their major retailers in town on one of their major retail corridors, and we're able to track the cell phones that were inside that store at a particular time, and then translate that to a map to show exactly where those customers are coming from at different points of the day and time. We can show path to purchase, where they were 2 hours before. 8, 9, 10 years ago, the information you relied on might be credit card data. Well, today's cell phone analysis is sort of taking over that market because we can zoom in on an aerial map and be able to see exactly this neighborhood is shopping at that particular location of that retailer, and this neighborhood is not, and then try to identify those factors as to why they're not. So understanding your trade area and being able to verify that is so important. Taking that trade area and then converting it to numbers is sort of the next step in that. So understanding the demographics, and like I said, go ahead and pull the 1 and 3 and 5 mile radius reports and the 10 and 15 and 20 minute drive time reports for your community so that you know those and can compare those to the retail trade area and what it tells about you. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to make sure you're representing your trade area in multiple ways, and you know exactly the numbers as to who you have and what their ethnic background is and what their educational attainment is and what their incomes are, because those are so important. The next step in that would be psychographics. So this is another report that, just trying to get the facts out there. Psychographics relates 67 segments across the country and identifies those socioeconomic traits as to who you have in your community, what are their spending habits. You need to understand, we have retailers all the time that ask us, if it's Tractor Supply, they want to make sure they have a very segmented market of who they sell to. They want to make sure your community represents their target market. And psychographics is something that can tell us that. The next report would be what we call a gap or leakage report. Sometimes we call it an opportunity report because this is where you can analyze your actual sales versus your potential sales. So if we take that retail trade area and then we apply that to state incomes and state spending habits, and then multiply that times the spending habits that we find from psychographics and other reports, we can identify what the potential sales of that many people in your trade area are actually spending. And then if we compare that to the actual sales of what's actually being spent in your city limits, we know what they're getting in their cars on a Friday night and driving to go find, or on Saturdays, or on their way home from work, what they're actually out there buying that they can't get within your city limits. And category by category, these that are listed on the screen are the major ones that we identify, but then we can narrow it down to categories and then even retailers from there that we can identify for recruiting. And this information is so important because it allows you to understand the total number of sales that you stand to capture, or you could go out and keep from leaking your community, and then particular categories in which you can go and pick up on that particular category's leakage. Understanding the daytime and workforce population. So you need to know your influx and outflux. Are you a ghost town during the day, or are you the opposite? Do you have a small population at night, but you have so much industry that all these people come into your city limits during the day and would be there to shop? Restaurants ask us all the time, what's the daytime population? Do you have blue collar or white collar workers? Are they available during the lunch hour to be able to come in and eat? Are they in town to be able to buy groceries on their way home in our city limits before they get on the interstate and head out of here? Daytime and workforce population and knowing those numbers is certainly important. And then having a sites inventory at your disposal. And using those in sort of a interesting way and being able to present those. It amazes me all the time that we come in and a lot of communities we work with have no idea of the properties that are available within their own city limits. The first question we typically get once we've presented to a retail site selector or to a retailer's representative is, well, where are you going to put us? What's the sites available? Am I going to have to pay a high price for a piece of land, or is there an existing building that we can take over? But having that sites inventory and presenting it either through like an interactive site map or even to the point of a conceptual site plan, which we'll talk about in a second, is critical in being able to provide that information in a tangible way immediately when somebody's interested. So with that, I'm going to kind of set us up for talking about the different channels of marketing and turn it over to Lee and Mark and allow them to kind of share their expertise in this category.
Scott, thanks again for having Lee Campbell.
Certainly. Lee, I want to start off just with a quick question to kind of do an icebreaker here. But I know when you guys start to work with the community, and you're coming in and working with them on on their marketing strategy, what are some of the things that you look at to sort of determine a starting place?
Well, one of the first things we do is we ask a lot of questions. What's the marketing need? Is it workforce development, industrial site, an overhaul of everything? What's the history of the organization? What's the temperature of the board? Are they proactive? State of the current website, state of the current marketing efforts, things like that.
And another thing that's real important is, you know, everybody's not starting at the same place, so we really try to hone in on what is their goal. Where are they right now and where are they trying to be? And then, of course, what are their assets to get there? All of that's got to be conveyed in the marketing.
Well, and on the screen right now, you know, it talks about, you've got the word branding up there. So you mentioned branding. We've all heard that word. What exactly is branding for community and economic development?
Well, I was in Junction City one time making a presentation to a board, and a little lady, she must have been, I don't know, in her 80s, 85 or so. She asked a really good question. She said, what is branding? Or what is a brand? And I had to stop, and I know what logos and marketing is, but I answered her and I said, well, brand is the truths about your communities, the things that make your community true. And then branding is the process of creating a logo and a tagline that gives a face to that truth.
Yeah, but it's more than just a logo and a tagline. What the brand is the messaging in whatever medium we use to convey it is how are we going to community? You know, obviously you can use all these media, websites, direct mail, digital, but what is the core truth about that community? It is the message, and then how we convey it. So logo and tagline is an important part of it, but some people often confuse that with the brand, and those are elements of the brand. One thing about it, though, is that branding needs to be very consistent. So whatever you do, you need to do it throughout. Here's some examples of some logos at the bottom of the page, of different logos that we've done for different parts, different areas of the country. As we said, it's branding is the process, and the elements that come out of it is the messaging, the logo, the tagline, and a strategy. This is just an example of one that we've done. We've been working with Charlotte County, Florida for quite a while. We recently rebranded them, and their tagline is "Your business cleared for takeoff." The strategy behind that is they have a lot of aviation-related assets, and they have a brand new aviation school. They have a huge amount of land surrounding their international airport. So they're ideally poised for aviation-related marketing, and so that's what this tagline is about.
So this is a really good looking, attractive logo. Of course, it represents Charlotte County. You get that Florida feel in for, you know, from the look and feel of it. And when we go in to talk to a community, this is only half the battle, coming up with a logo and a tagline that represents the community. On our next slide, we're going to show, you know, kind of the discipline or the other half of the battle is taking that logo and that tagline and being disciplined about it in all the different channels that you put out there, whether it be print or website or social media or on a billboard, everything looking consistent to show that it's all on the same page and it's coming from the same organization.
Yeah, and we are actually doing some digital marketing for them as well.
Scott, are you still there?
We lose Scott. So one of the things we want to talk about now are some trends, how marketing has, particularly websites, have evolved since we've been in the business, and we've been in business for about 16 years. So some of the trends that we're seeing now are larger graphics on websites, where in the past a website homepage might be heavy text with smaller graphics. It's now done a 180. Now there's a large photo or some sort of graphic and less copy. We've just, in the last 2 years, we've had a lot of our clients asking us to redesign their website, bigger graphics, less copy. So we're starting to see more of that. As everyone who's been looking at websites lately notices, we're doing more scrolling. So you're getting to see something that's really huge, and Scott's talked about this, is data. You're starting to see more and more data. It's what site selectors are expecting. It's why they're coming to your site in many cases. They want to get a sense of what your look and feel are, but they're looking for very specific data. There's some data that they already have access to, and they're coming to your website to confirm it. But there's some information that they may not have access to. For instance, your local wage survey by a certain category, they may be able to find out more about what you're paying for certain jobs in your community that they may not have access to. So there's a lot of types of data, and it's readily available, and that's becoming king, where everyone's wanting to incorporate more data into their sites. And one of the ways that data is being displayed is through infographics. Infographics are easy to comprehend, easy to use, easy to grasp ways to present data. It's a graphical way to present data. We're starting to see many opportunities to do more infographics. One really cool thing that we're starting to see more of is personalized websites, and there's several ways to do it. One is to do it through a landing page where you give them a prospect. You may be sending out an email blast or something, and you give them a URL. It doesn't necessarily take them to your main website. It takes them to a landing page, which is obviously very trackable. That the only way to access that landing page may be through that email link, so it tells you who they are, and so you can track the user that way. Another thing you can do, though, is the user may be representing a certain industry sector, say, for instance, life sciences, and you know who they are, and you send them a URL that if they click that one, it tells you, or tells the website specifically who they are, and therefore you display information, graphics, text, everything is displayed in response to who that viewer is.
We've all seen this done before, where we got something in the mail, maybe from a car company, and it was all personalized to you, had your name on it, maybe had some other type of variable information. That's derived from a database that goes into a printed piece that is then segmented and sent to you and personalized. And so this type of marketing is being used in websites, and like Mark said, it can be very industry specific.
It's barely been tapped into, but you're starting to see more and more of this, and moving forward, we'll be seeing more of it. The reason it's so effective to use is that the way websites are built nowadays, they're built with a series of modules and blogs. And so the programmer or the client could actually put all the copy in there for a certain industry sector. The URL is based on a name, so if that name could appear in the website, it's not as complex as it sounds. And so we have the ability to do those as well. Last thing I want to mention, and there are numerous trends. One of them is a looping video. Starting to see more and more videos on websites. On the home page, when you launch it, there's a video that runs in the background. So those are just a handful of some of the trends that you're starting to see.
Yeah, Mark, this is Scott. So I was just gonna, we are certainly a feel, touch, see-based consumer group, and obviously, we want things tangible at our hands. Websites are certainly one of those methods, but everything you just talked about, from the way we're cutting down on copy and building up on the visual side of that, is definitely a trend that we all need to keep our eye on. So I talked a little bit about sites inventory and being able to present those sites. Let's quickly transition over to 3D renderings. And I know Marketing Alliance has a solid reputation, and we rely on you guys a lot of times for helping us create 3D renderings. What is that, and why do you find 3D so important?
Well, it's simple. Visualization, that's kind of our mantra. We believe here at Marketing Alliance strongly that having a 3D rendering of some sort for a site or building always helps the prospect see what you're selling. It's having that vision is paramount.
Yeah, we've got a great example of, well, we've got a number of great examples, but one I want to talk about is at the top of the screen, you see the two visuals. One is an empty current site property, and then the future site development. That's an actual project we did in Sumter, South Carolina. It was the presentation we did for Continental Tire, and that was a site that was chosen by Continental Tire, and they've actually built the plant now. It's in production. And after we did the presentation, I had the opportunity to meet with the site selector that worked that project. And I was showing him the presentation. He was giving me some great feedback about it from his perspective. But when we got to the slide on the right, he said, let me tell you something interesting about this visual. He said of the 4 locations that were the finalists for this project, this was their least favorite site, and that this was probably going to be the first site they would eliminate. He said, but when Continental Tire saw an actual Continental Tire plant on the site, it convinced them that this site would work. He said, now I'm not going to tell you that it won them the project, because of course it didn't. They won it based on a lot of other factors. He said, but I will tell you that visual kept them in the competition. And it's kind of mind-blowing to think about, because that's a $1.2 billion plant that hinged to a large extent on a graphic. And it's scary to think that that's they risk losing that plant by not having that visual.
So anytime that you can take a site or a building and do some sort of visual to show what could be, that's always strong. So whether it's on a website, PowerPoint presentation, on a web ad, or a movie, a 3D rendering to us shows the possibility of what can be. And we got some examples here that Mark can slide through, just kind of show you some of our capabilities.
And this is a project we did for a large mega site, virtual build out. This is a site in North Alabama that we built out with 2 master plans. One is a campus layout, and the second one was a single large industrial manufacturing.
Now, a lot of times when we do these 3D renderings, there's no plans, no architectural drawings, no engineering specs to go by, such as in this case in Alabama. Basically, the economic developer says, I have this land, this is the kind of industry I want to go after, so we basically developed a 3-dimensional rendering out of thin air, and give it to them as a tool to help market the site.
Thin air and a lot of experience.
Thin air and a lot of experience.
Yeah. Our graphic designer actually has an industrial design background, so that helps. This was a site that was chosen by Yokohama Tire Company in Clay County, Mississippi, and it was not built from a actual architectural file. It was something that we created just based on what the economic developer had given us as his specs.
And when Marketing Alliance first started, we kind of got started in the commercial development side of things, helping commercial developers show their office parks or retail spaces and things of that nature. And of course, that translated on into economic development. So these next slides are some retail situations, which Scott kind of hits around your territory.
Now, this building, we did a video and we did a series of renderings, but the main reason it was a mixed use, so it was residential and retail. And the developer needed the marketing tools in order to get secure funding, in order to get enough tenants and residential units leased to justify the expense. And so that was and the building is built now, but that was the primary reason that we did this project. This is actually phase 2 of a retail development that we worked on. And what was interesting about this project, we worked with the client. Well, they actually, on phase 1, they went to ICSC before they engaged us, and they tried to sell this retail development to tenants. And the retailers just didn't get the concept. They didn't understand the market, they didn't get the concept, and they didn't have any success really selling the development. So they came back to us and they asked us to create a 3D video, which we did. And it had a virtual fly-through, and then they went back to ICSC a year later and were able to secure some pretty big name tenants, not just at ICSC, but at other recruiting as well, with Apple and Fresh Market and Abercrombie, because they were actually able to visualize the development. And this is the second phase of the same development now that they're working on, that they've successfully built.
We see this all the time with, it's so hard to walk into especially a trade show and try to sell a concept on a large piece of property. So if you're dealing with a 8, 10, 20, 40, we just worked in Sheboygan, Wisconsin on a 99-acre parcel with 5 different family trusts. You need to be able to share that vision and show what it is. If you're fighting for letters of intent and trying to leverage one retailer against the next to be able to get your 60, 70, 80% occupancy so that you can move forward with that, you need to be able to share this vision and this concept in a 3D form or some way that they can see the vision the way you see it. Especially when a developer, like I said today, they're pulling every bit of the facts and the data they can. They're running every number within their pro forma to make sure that they can make money on this project. You need to be able to show all those things, and to be able to get those letters of intent really makes or breaks the project. We would always say this, sort of the steps to this before a developer is going to go spend $80, $90, $100,000 on hiring an architect or civil engineer, somebody to take a look at their topography and to make sure that the site can work and the layout of the actual buildings. The first step might be look at just a 2D conceptual site plan. Take that, and then maybe the next step would be to put it into a format like this. So get a marketing campaign and a platform and a strategy together that allows you to do something like a 3D rendering, and then moving into the phases of running infrastructure and topography of the land and the civil, structural, and all the other engineering capabilities that you need to make sure that project can move forward.
Yeah, and in this business, obviously, for these developers, time is really money. And certainly they can go out and market these projects any number of ways and be successful. But something like this certainly speeds the process up, where they have a lot better success. They get a lot better response.
Anytime we can walk into a trade show or, have a city or an economic developer with us, and we have something built into our site profile or a marketing piece of material that we have, something like this in a 3D rendering, that conversation goes a lot further, and we can talk about specifics of retailers and other things rather than talking about, well, can you get city and water, city water and sewer to me, or, well, the topography of the land is different, or what's it going to look like when it's finally built. This provides all that information so you can take the conversation to the next level. In addition to that, what you want to be able to do is, like we said, all that other data, you want to make sure that you can point them back to either a piece on your website or some additional data that can back up all those claims. And interactive maps are one of those. Lee and Mark, I know one of the things that you guys use, and that's a unique tool that's out there right now, is interactive mapping. We see this on the GIS platform and how to take some of those reports and putting that back into it. But what are interactive maps, and how do you guys use these in a marketing strategy?
Well, a community should always have a map of some sort on their website and go to links of showing all the transportation assets in the region, how to get product in and how to get product out. A static map will work, but we try to take it a step further. We do a variety of different maps. What you're seeing on your screen right now is a proximity map, and it shows all the transportation assets for rail, roads, ports, and airports. And without a lot of, there's nothing data driven about these. These are very custom maps. They're basically art layers on top of art layers showing all the different transportation assets. And it allows you to click on these at one click at a time, just to kind of see all the different transportation assets and how to get product in and product out. Going beyond that, we also take it to another level. And another tab on a map that we do would be an asset map, where we're showing a site or maybe a building, and we're showing the utilities and the possibilities for what could be.
Yeah, and this is one thing, obviously with GIS, there's a lot of different ways to map a site. You've got Google Maps and any number of things. But what we think that, and we believe from meeting with site selectors, that this is about marketing and it's about selling. And we've had a meeting, with a site selector, and she said, and it's one of my favorite quotes, she said, "I love, love, love interactive maps." Because it goes back to visualization. She can visualize the site, see what is and what the potential of the site is, all in one graphic, and she can drive it. So she can turn layers on and off. And it's a real easy to use. It's very clean. You're not depending on a system that you don't really control the data in the system. This one's totally controlled by the client because they tell us what they want to put into their interactive map. And it's
yeah,
all about
I
marketing.
I don't know how you can get a more surefire testimonial than somebody saying they love interactive maps. We see it all day long. I mean, instead of a piece of paper that says city sewer, city water, here it is, it comes to this point, show them an interactive map as to how it moves throughout the industrial park and where your hookups would be, and what does the rail look like, what is the what's the proximity of it to the next rail station, or what do those look like on an interactive map? Is certainly important.
We did this for Barry Barnett in Texas, and he uses this a variety of ways. He uses it when he goes to a site selector's office. He can pull it up on an iPad and show it. It works, just the same as it would on a computer. He uses it in a conference room setting. He can pull it up when there's a site visit, and he can click on the assets on and off. And just like we're talking right now, when he's on the phone with somebody on the fly, he can have them go to his website and look at the interactive map and visit the site virtually, basically.
It definitely sets Midlothian apart from maybe some of their other competition, no doubt. So the next channel of marketing I'd like to address would be movies and dynamic videos. We all know that movies are still a part of the marketing mix and are becoming more and more important. So how has their importance changed in the past few years?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting thing, because 5 years ago, SEDC, the Southern Economic Development Council, did a survey of site selectors about how they use marketing media and how they rank it. And at that time, in 2012, they ranked videos at the very bottom. It was the bottom of all the different types of media. Fast forward 5 years, and site selectors are not only using them now, but they're actually recommending to economic developers that they're working with. They say, in order to potentially close the deal with our client, you need to do a video. And so they've come a long way. Every one of them, we've heard them speak at different conferences, they're saying, yes, I absolutely watch these videos. Keep them brief, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes max. But it's a great way to tell all of the facts and figures about the community in a very, very appealing way. Again, it's marketing, but you're talking about workforce development, talking about all the things that make the community a good location for an industrial prospect or a retail prospect.
Also, if you can do testimonial videos, I heard a site selector say one time that even if it's a crude video, it didn't have to be Steven Spielberg-esque type movie or production. Just get some existing business leaders in your area and put those on your website so they can hear, one-on-one from those people what it's like to do business in your communities. And what we're starting to see a lot more of these days in producing of movies is foreign movies, or doing movies to foreign prospects. They kind of expect those type of high quality videos. So we're starting to do a lot of those with the narration, the translation, and everything being geared toward a foreign market.
Yeah, Scott, we lost control of our arrows, so I don't know if the visual got kicked out. You there?
Yeah, we're here. We're moving it forward here.
Okay, good, because we're not able to see it anymore, but that's fine.
So
I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, I would just add really quickly to that. The videos are we see them more and more, especially when we talk about copy edit and, you know, cutting down on the content that you have on the website, but adding things like dynamic videos. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and I'd love to get your input on this, is social media. We all know that social media is out there and being certainly used right now. So is that a good move for economic developers and communities to go? We've all heard the do's and don'ts. You know, how do you manage that? I know within our own firm, we use a platform called HubSpot, which allows us to, you know, we can take one employee and use a couple hours a week to be able to address multiple platforms on social marketing. And we know that, you know, social marketing is certainly important for the younger generations, but what would you guys recommend for economic developers and communities to address with social marketing and digital marketing?
Well, the interesting thing about social media is that how quickly it's evolved. It was something a lot of people were doing 2 or 3 years ago, but there was not the same strategy about it. Now, it's a more mature marketing channel, and people are doing it in a lot more effective way. And the main thing I would say, and not to get too deep in the weeds, but the main thing is that understand who is following you in that arena. And there, for instance, you're not as likely to be speaking to site selectors and industrial prospects on Facebook or Twitter. You're more likely to be communicating with influencers. For instance, your state's Department of Economic Development, or your utility companies, or the railroads. And so you prepare your messaging more for those markets. And it's still just as effective, because if a project manager at your state is constantly seeing your messaging and you're talking about your assets and your workforce and presenting your numbers in the best possible light, then you're convincing that that project manager to keep you in the mix the next time a project may come through the state, or likewise through the utility company. So it's a very effective thing to do, and it can be done pretty easily. What we recommend is doing a series of graphics that are kind of like the website, big graphics, not a lot of text, putting them in a program like Hootsuite or Sprout Social, managing them across a month at a time, and then keeping that messaging out there, maybe tying it to stories that are about your state. For instance, in Texas, they often have stories about how Texas is a great place to do business. And we've seen some clients of ours who have tied the state story to their community, saying Texas is a great place to do business and we've got land, and bringing the two together. So that's that, and then the digital advertising, of course, is gotten so targeted, where you can do retargeted advertising. If you're targeting someone who's in food processing, you can go to places where there's industry news about food processing, and then maybe the viewer goes to CNN next, and your ad appears because it's following them from that specific website. So there's a lot of things that can be done in digital marketing.
Well, there's certainly aspects of analytics that I don't personally understand, but the ability and for a firm like yours to be able to go in and track those analytics and then use those analytics to help reach your audience in a little bit different way. We see this on our side of it, even just from monitoring the traffic with our own website, but then also social media insights. So understanding who and what and who's following, who's liking, who's sharing, and who of your followers, how those are getting translated through the crowd can certainly draw your interest in the consumers that you're looking at. Google Analytics are certainly important these days, and I appreciate you guys sharing a little bit about that. So we're going to talk real quick about, Mark and Lee, do you mind sharing a little bit about advanced analytics and how these daily leads and some of those business details right quick, and we'll end with that topic.
Yeah, the biggest thing, and just with Google Analytics, you track numbers. You can tell what town they're from. But with advanced analytics, we have a program called Site Tracker. You actually can identify, based on the IP address, who the actual visitor is. So all of these things that we've been talking about have been intended to drive traffic to a conversion. So that's why we're driving traffic through the website. Well, if you can identify by name and you know where they came from, you can obviously use your dollars best because you know how they got to your website. Then you know who they are and you know what they're looking at on your website. Obviously, in the prospecting, if you're preparing an RFI and you know they've been on your website and you know what they're looking at, maybe what their concerns are, maybe it's incentives, maybe it's your wastewater treatment capabilities or whatever, then you can prepare your RFI response with some solid intel. So there's a lot of ways this can be used, but in short, you're actually able to track your website visitors by name, and that's a huge advantage.
A lot of times when going back to those initial questions, one of the first questions we ask is, well, how's your website doing? And a lot of economic developers, they can't answer that because they're not using any kind of analytics. So the takeaway from this is that the tools are there, whether you're using basic Google Analytics or something like Site Tracker, the tools are there to help you be proactive about your website and to let it tell you how people are receiving your information.
So with that, I just want to thank Lee and Mark for their participation today and obviously sharing their expertise and talking about the different channels of marketing and what they're seeing on the forefront of economic development marketing in today's market. I want to just, like I said, to kind of sum it all up, I'd like to talk, we want to make sure that if nothing else, you have a proactive front out there, and then you take maybe some of these channels of marketing that we talked about today and can use those to leverage your community or your region or your agency, maybe over whoever the next person is that you're competing against. It's so important in today's market that you have the data that is so important and that it is fact-based and market-driven. And then you have the right channels of marketing that can get that message out there. And again, it's taking the highlights and the positives of your community and sharing those in the best and most technologically advanced way possible. So again, Lee and Mark, thank you for your help today. And since we're running a little short on time, what we're going to do is take the questions that come in, and we will send out an email with the recording to those that attended today, as well as answer those in-depth questions that we may be able to elaborate a little bit further on that way. My email address is semison@theretailcoach.net. I would welcome any questions, or you can obviously reach us at info@theretailcoach.net or info@marketingallianceinc.com, and certainly available by telephone. So we thank you for your participation today in today's webinar, and we will follow up with an email to the attendees. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.